Hello, it's Diva Carla. I am the Cosmic Crone, and I am here with you for Viva La Vegas, Meet Your Vagus Nerve. I wanted to speak with you about the vagus nerve and introduce you to it because it is physical and neurological support for your voice. Hi, Susie, welcome. As people come on, I'm going to just start in. But as you come on, flick me a heart or a like, ask questions if you have it, comment. It's always good to make this a bit of a conversation. So, the vagus nerve. We're going to be talking about voice. If you've been following me, you know that I talk about the three divine feminine powers of sex, wealth, and voice. And if you look through this group, you will find all kinds of articles and videos about sex and all kinds of articles and videos about money and wealth. And every time it's time to talk about voice, I kind of step forward and then step back a little bit. And I think I kind of know why. And that's why I've decided that I'm going to speak about voice for the next 2 months. We are going to make up for lost time because we women need to speak our voice. We want to speak our voice. Everything that we want comes through our voice. It's like our magic wand, our manifesting power. And speaking our voice, letting our voice be heard is dangerous. And I remembered how I learned that as a very little girl, and I placed the video of it here. I did a live stream last week about that. And so I want to begin this unit on the voice by introducing the vagus nerve because we're going to work with it. We may not always talk about it, but a lot of the exercises that I do when I work with women around sexuality and orgasm, we are working with the vagus nerve. We are doing things that activate and tone the vagus nerve. And the same thing, one of the most exciting things I learned in my studies in preparation to do the work I do is that the throat, the voice box, is connected to the womb and the cervix by, guess what? The vagus nerve. So your sexuality, your capacity for pleasure and orgasm is impacted by how well your vagus nerve is working and how well your throat is working. And there are lots of moving parts to that, which we will talk about, but we won't talk about them all today because this topic of Viva La Vegas is vast, and I'm only going to just kind of hold up a little picture, not literally, but say, hi, meet your vagus nerve. So thank you. I see that several of you are showing up, and it's wonderful to have you here. So this is your body's physical support for your voice. You know that we talk about the energetic womb, which is vast, and there's a physical womb, which is really important, and we need to take good care of that. And then there are the physical genitals that give us sexual pleasure and erotic feeling and tap into our emotions so powerfully. And then there is sexual energy, which is vast, and we don't even know everything about that. So the vagus nerve and the voice, the vagus nerve is the physical support along with breath and musculature and all of that. And it is the physical support for our minds and how our minds and emotions, our whole body, can be funneled through the voice, which is so much vaster than we understand. So, the vagus nerve comes from the Latin for wanderer. And that's because it wanders. There are kind of two reasons for this name. It wanders from brain to butt, and it is outside of the spinal cord. So it's kind of wandering off on its own path, not where most of the big cord of nerves that controls almost everything else is. And so it comes from the base of the brain through the voice box, the larynx, the lungs, the heart, the gut, all of the organs of the gut, like the stomach, liver, gallbladder, spleen, pancreas. But guess what? Not the adrenals. The adrenal glands are not connected to the vagus nerve. That's like a whole different system, which makes perfect sense. And then it goes all the way down, through the intestines, all the way to the anus, to the reproductive organs. And it gathers all this information. When I Googled vagus nerve, and I encourage you to do that too, because you will find out all the things that can go wrong when it's not working well, every disease known to man, and all the things that can go right when it is working well. Excuse me, I have new headphones and they're getting used to them. So look that up. Just start reading about the vagus nerve. It's so fascinating, and you'll understand why it's so important. So one of the first things I learned about the vagus nerve, and this is related to my specialty, sexuality, when you stimulate the anus through anal touch or penetration in an erotic way, or not even, it doesn't even have to be erotic, it can be therapeutic, you're stimulating the vagus nerve. And it's what we call, I'm going to get geeky on you, sorry. It's what we call down regulating, and that's really important for expanding your capacity for orgasm and for expanding the variety, the dimensions of orgasm you can experience. And we're not going to go deeper into that right now, but if that excites you, then stay tuned, because the voice is related. And the next time I'm offering the Sex and Sovereignty, not Sex and Sovereignty, but Sacred Pleasure Sovereign Womb program, you might want to sign up, because that is where we go deep into that. So the vagus nerve wanders through all the organs, through the deep core of your body, and it is the second brain. It is the channel of the enteric nervous system, and it's what it's called. And that's the gut brain, the intuitive mind. And it's so interesting. One thing that the vagus nerve does is it feels into your gut, and it assesses the gut biome, the microfauna and flora that are inside of your gut. It checks them out, and it says, what are these guys doing? What are they saying? Are they healthy? Are they helping? Or are they making this person sick? Are they going to damage the body, creating inflammation? And what do we need to do about it? And it communicates that information to the brain, but probably not in a chattery voice, because the vagus nerve is about repose. It is the parasympathetic nervous system, the one that down regulates. I said it doesn't touch the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands, which shoot out the flight or fight hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, that's a different system. That's the sympathetic, go get it, go do something, fight, run. Vagus nerve is hide, or the danger's over, we can relax. We're safe now. And I'll get to more about that later. So As it works with this second brain, the second aspect of the mind, it is making connections through gut, belly, womb, heart, voice, and mind. And when it is well toned and working properly, all the stuff that we have to do with our minds is easier. So a well-toned vagus nerve can ameliorate, can relieve depression and anxiety. The racing mind, the racing heart, the sense of the monkey mind, and very many meditation practices, both physical, breath, and mental, like yoga in all of its forms, work with the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve really connects you to your body. If you're feeling disconnected to your body, it's because your vagus nerve is not working properly. So why do we have that? Why are our vagus nerves not well toned? Well, one is we live in a very stressful world, and we're running on cortisol and adrenaline. We are depleting our adrenals to keep going. We consider, the culture that we're in considers rest and repose and replenishment and presence, considers it to be, it's not a value, considers it to be lazy, considers it to be, even if it's considered important in the sense of, yeah, you need your 8 hours of sleep and all that, being present with ourselves is not a value of this culture. We are in some kind of adrenaline rush all the time, whether it's I must do, I'm late, I have too much to do, or we feel the constant threat of judgment. The boss is going to get mad at me. My husband, my kids, the people, I'm late to pick up the kids at school, the perfection of my home, the perfection of my body. Or, I've got a minute, I need to relax. And for us, many times, relaxation involves some sort of drugging or numbing with wine, food, sex, distraction, our phones, Netflix, drama. All of these things are antithetical. They impair our vagus nerve, and they cause us not to take care of our vagus nerve, which means basically taking care of ourselves. We don't have to sit around and think about our vagus nerve. I'm going to tell you before I leave 2 or 3 things you can do to take care of your vagus nerve, and you don't even have to think about your vagus nerve. But you can if you want to, because it's fun. So unremitting stress, living on our adrenal hormones, and junk food, sugar, flour, crunchy things. We are constantly tensing our jaw. I tend to have that too. I got it right now. Whew. Tensing my jaw. We tense our jaw. We tense our body. We don't breathe. We breathe shallowly. We hold our breath a lot. How many times in a day do you catch yourself holding your breath? And we're numbing out feeling, and there's a reason for that. I'm not going to go there just yet. I'll touch on it before I leave. The other reason is because part of this numbing activity that we do involves inflammation. We eat sugar, we eat substances that fill in our receptor sites in our brains so that instead of feel-good, natural hormones and neurotransmitters that our bodies will make when our vagus nerve is toned, we'll fill it up with junk food and phytochemicals that are put into our processed foods. So eating improperly, eating unnatural food, and stress all creates inflammation that totally screws up our vagus nerve. And we live sedentary lives. We don't move enough. And we do a lot of sitting. So we're doing a lot of tensing around the neck and jaw and shoulders because we're staring at a screen and typing and tense. And the way that our ancestors used to run through the forest chasing prey or stopping from being prey, running from a predator, or just running because it was fun and it was one way to get from one place to another. We used our whole bodies when we lived back then. Now we use our fingers and our neck muscles and our eye muscles, and that totally screws with the tone of our vagus nerve as well as everything else that's going on down there. So, and the other thing is pure trauma. We are a traumatized nation. Our ancestors were traumatized. They immigrated from a war, from persecution, from starvation. Then they had to come here and be rejected and work really hard and to become American or wherever you're listening from. I mean, that's the story for my ancestors. But every person, every culture on the planet has had to deal with some kind of ancestral trauma, and then so many of us have had that trauma visited in our own lives. And for some people, it is really extreme, from abuse or disaster or war or loss, death, illness. And for some of us, it's less extreme, like the story that I told. It had an impact on me. I don't think it gave me PTSD. I don't know. Maybe I should ask a therapist. But anyway, we're dealing with the trauma, and that is affecting our vagus nerve. And it also impacts our ability to work with the vagus nerve and tone it. So I want to mostly talk about the vagus nerve and voice because that's where we're going with this in the future over the rest of this year. Because I want to talk about the physical support for your voice. So when the vagus nerve is not working well, and it's a feedback loop. Your vagus nerve isn't working well, you tend to be constricted in your throat physically, and in your jaw, and in your tongue, and then in your breath. And being constricted will impair your vagus nerve. So it's everything about the vagus nerve is a feedback loop. I think everything about our physiology is a feedback loop. That's how we can learn and change. We have to change that feedback loop. So what's happening with the constriction of the throat and larynx, you get a congestion of the belly and womb, and I have heard people talk about that. It feels like a congestion. And then you get a dysregulation of the heartbeat, and then you don't breathe well. And all of this tends to happen unconsciously because we do not know that we're holding that stress in our bodies. And it can feel really strange when we attempt to let it go. And I'm going to speak this because I really began to get this piece today when I was reading about the vagus nerve, and I need to do a lot more looking at it because I hadn't gotten this before. And I've been reading about the vagus nerve for a while, but this just kind of landed on me in a way that I hadn't heard before. And it is that when we are dealing with trauma in our lives, basically PTSD, saying the defenses that we have, and I'm really oversimplifying, but the defenses that we have to protect ourselves, to shut off our feelings, it's physical. And so this throat, shallow breathing, dysregulated heartbeat, congested and constricted belly, these are ways that we protect ourselves from remembering and from the feelings of remembering trauma. And we may not even remember the original event. It may be buried somewhere in this body, in these tissues, and yet we are still living our lives that way, protecting ourselves from remembering. We don't want to remember. We can't remember. It's not safe to remember. And so when you follow some of the things I'm going to suggest here, or some of the work we may do as we continue talking about the voice, you're liable to trigger some shit. Like, it actually hurts. It feels too strange. It feels too scary. It feels completely unsafe. And you want to respect that, and you want to understand that that's information, and find a way, find a way to help yourself deal with that. And don't be pushed by me or by anyone else to do something that doesn't yet feel safe. And I'll speak more about that before we close. But I just want to let it be known that working with the vagus nerve to tone it and get all those benefits, for someone who's working with deep trauma, carrying deep trauma, it can backfire. So you have to proceed with awareness and support. So, about our voice, I've had this experience, and maybe you have too. You need to speak your truth. You need to ask for what you want. You need to break up with somebody. You need to fire somebody. You need to ask for what you need. Ask for the job. Ask for the salary. Ask for the sale. Name your price. Speak truth to power. Define a boundary. Express a big emotion like anger, passion, or even say, I love you. All of these things can make us feel really unsafe. They're high-risk behaviors. And yet, our power and our capacity to live full lives, fully on purpose, requires that we be able to do that. And so, my experience with all of these things has been, I shut down. I get a dry mouth, my tongue gets thick, my heart races, I might get sweaty, I get an unpleasant feeling, maybe up my spine or in my belly, jaw tenses, I forget what I was going to say, my brain goes numb. I'm better now. I've done some work, but it still happens. Especially the more that I feel is at stake for the conversation or the thing I need to say. Like, I feel pretty safe with you all. But with my partner, there can be a lot at stake. And sometimes I need to say things. I need to be truthful. I need to be honest. I need to be loving. I need to be vulnerable. I need to say what I want. I need to express a strong emotion. And it's scary. So your experience may be that one of these areas triggers you, and other ways you don't feel it so much. And maybe you've done a lot of work so that you're better at it than you were when you were 12 or 13 or 21. I still talk to women who say, I'm fine unless it's a cute guy. And then I turn into a 13-year-old again. Welcome to the club. Yeah. Toning your vagus nerve can help. It's a step. It's a step because it allows you to come into your body and to remember, what was it that I wanted? So time is passing, so I want to kind of move on through this. So the anxiety around speaking what needs to be said can reach a point of shutdown where we don't want to know our truth, feel our truth, think the truth. We avoid conflict and we let people walk all over us. And then, of course, things come out sideways and then we feel like shit because clearly we were wrong and we screwed up. And people will be happy to let us know that. And we shut down and dissociate. So it doesn't take a deep scarring trauma to cause that to happen. Any experience that plants the belief that I'm not safe here, it's not safe for me to speak, can set up this pattern in our physical neurology, in our bodies, and in our thinking. So our vagus nerve is here to support our thinking and our shifts in thinking. So what we want to do with supporting our vagus nerve is to begin, we want to begin setting up positive feedback loops in our physiology to support mental feedback loops. So everything is connected. And the first step, how do we break through a dysfunctional vagus nerve? How do we begin to strengthen this incredible, beautiful channel between our belly, our soul, our intuition, and our brains, and most importantly, our voice? Well, it's multidimensional, and it's definitely a multidimensional approach. So first, it takes courage. We start with the heart. We start by making a courageous decision to begin to do the work. And then most of us can very simply do specific things. And if it creates discomfort, we have the capacity to move through that because our trauma is at such a level that we're not re-triggering, we're not going back to some event that we may not even remember and finding ourselves going back into flight mode or retreat mode or hide mode. It's usually much more subtle. It can happen like that, but it's more subtle. When I did my video last week, I said I started hiding because every time I step forward and excuse me, I'm going to distract everybody. We're having incredible pink sunset. I'm sitting in a completely pink world. I love it. So yeah, I learned that I go into hiding and stop doing Facebook Lives or something after I've had an incredibly successful time of speaking up. And that's because something unconsciously was activated that you are going to get in trouble, you're going to get a spanking, you are being a bad girl. And I can look at that truth and say, yes, thank you for showing me what I've been doing. Now, let me do all of the work I need to do around that in my mind and in my body and in my courage to keep walking forward until it's not an issue anymore. Most of us have that capacity. Some of us might need to do deeper work with a therapist, a healer, a coach, neurolinguistic programming, hypnotherapy. There's so many things. There's even machines like biofeedback and vagus nerve stimulators that I guess for really deep cases. So yeah, for some of us, we need to kind of take a medical approach because things are so intense. But for some of us, we need to just do the work and support each other and keep going and probably have a good coach, which I happen to have a good coach. So how do we break through this? A couple of ways, some specific things we can do to tone the vagus nerve. If you do yoga, especially working with the breath yoga, and I am not a yogini, so I forget what it's called, the beautiful breath work, pranayama. Somebody type it in for me, okay? But working with the prana, working with breath, working with life force energy through the breath. If you're doing yoga, you're already doing all this. And the thing is to watch out that you don't adrenalize your yoga and make it, let me be the best damn yoga practitioner I can be. Chill with your yoga. Love your vagus nerve with your yoga. But if you're not a yogini, maybe you're an athlete. Some athletics, you're stretching and your cool down and paying attention to breath can really help your vagus nerve. The actual moment of competition, maybe not. Very simply, breath, sound, and movement. And that reminds me of my Native American teacher, Grandfather Joseph Rael. He taught us about their concept of divine, of creator, of God, if you will, Wamachi, which translates breath, matter, movement. So the act of praying for them, which ceremony, ritual, dancing, toned and activated their vagus nerve. It's in the language. So breath work, a very simple breath work that you may have heard about, whether anybody mentioned the vagus nerve or not, is breathing in for a few counts and having the exhale be twice as long. So very commonly, it's 4. That's a comfortable level for most people. So inhaling for 4 counts. So I tapped my foot 4 times, and then exhaling for 8. When you exhale, you're completely emptying. When you inhale, you are bringing the air in and you are completely filling your torso, and let your shoulder blades go down, your shoulders go back, your chest expand, your heart open. So let's do that. And then exhale. And as you are squeezing that air out of your torso, you're pulling your belly up, your pelvic floor up, you're dropping your shoulders, you're relaxing around your center. So that's a basic breath. You do that 10 times, you are toning your vagus nerve. And there are many variations on breath that follow that same principle, and they tend to work on different aspects of your nervous system, different organs in your body. It's an extraordinary system of self-care that comes mostly from the Far East or from certain indigenous practices. But really, that simple basic thing: inhale 4 counts, exhale 8 counts. Inhale 3 counts, exhale 6 counts. Inhale 6 counts, exhale 12 counts. And the more you breathe, the more you can do, and it will have a different effect. And we will talk about some of those when we're working on voice more specifically. And if you sing, are you a singer? Because if you add voice and sound, you are further toning your vagus nerve. So chanting, if you chant Om, many yoga practices have the Om sound. Or my teacher, Grandfather Joseph, taught us to chant the vowels, A, E, I, O, U. Chanting a mantra, chanting your name, humming, buzzing like a bee. Zzz. Any kind of toning you do with your voice gets active in this, will tone your vagus nerve. And singing is wonderful because it really, singing and chanting, they do for you. They add the physical vibration of sound in your body, and they do the breath. You take in quickly, you fill your torso with breath, your lungs, and you learn how to support your breath with your diaphragm and your pelvic floor and your belly muscles, all the diaphragms. And when you sing, you are slowly letting that air out so that it supports the sound of your voice. When you're talking, same thing. Notice I just ran out of air on the word talking. So I'd like to take singing lessons with my friend so I could talk better. But that's another story. So singing and chanting, breathing, moving. So moving can be simple stretching. There are specific stretches, and many of the things that are good for the psoas and the core are also good for the vagus nerve. So it's huge, really. It's vast. And the thing is to find something that works for you. If something you're doing actually feels like it's triggering anxiety or unpleasant sensations, that's a clue. Don't do that. Maybe something different. Maybe the distraction for your mind of singing words can work with your vagus nerve while not triggering whatever unconscious memories or conscious memories that cause stress. So do what works for you. It doesn't all work for everybody. So that's what I have. So here we are supporting the voice by learning to take good care of our vagus nerve and all the things it does for us. And as I continue to talk about voice, I will talk more about those things. And I may or may not actually mention the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve, I'm talking about it as if it's one thing. Probably before this is all over, I'll do a big webinar with illustrations and things. There are multiple parts to the vagus nerve. And, oh, hi, Luna. Good to see you. And Quinn and Susan. So many wonderful people are here. Thank you for listening. What we're learning... Thank you, Susan. Good to see you. I'm just going to come up with the closing here. What was my closing? Did I have a rousing closing? I guess the important thing, the reason why I wanted to talk about vagus nerve at the beginning of the voice conversation is it gives you a measure of control. If you can't do anything else, you can breathe. If you can't remember what you were going to say, if you can't get the words to come out of your throat, if you sound like you're sucked helium when you try to talk because you're so nervous, just pause, stop, breathe, come back into your body. Coming back into your body is another way of saying tone your vagus nerve, activate your vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve is really the way you get into your body. Oh, and the thing that I almost was going to say, and I distracted myself. There are like 3 parts, 3 branches to the vagus nerve. I'm not even going to go there right now. It is so much more complex than I've given you here, more complex than I probably even want to understand myself. But if it's ever relevant, I'll tell you. I'll learn it and I'll tell you, or you can go look it up and tell me. So what your vagus nerve tells you at heart, at soul, at gut level, is that you matter. You belong here. Your voice is needed. Your voice is important, and you have a right to speak up, and you have a right to your desires, and you have a right to feel safe asking for what you want and saying what you need to say. So that is what voice is all about. Go enjoy your breath. Go enjoy feeling your beautiful, magnificent body. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.